Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Unique Peace. I am Janice. I'm a Reiki Master Teacher and Psychic Medium here on Long Island, New York. And today I am joined by Dr. Amy Robbins. She is a psychologist and medium and the host of Life, Death, and the Space in Between. And I am so excited to have her on and have this conversation. And join me in welcoming Dr. Robbins. Welcome.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, good. I just am excited to have you on because you have a unique take on spirituality and the veil and everything in between that. You are I know you're not a psychiatrist, you're a psychologist, and
Correct.
you
Yes.
bring in the spiritual side of things. So in your podcast, which I love, brings in the whole spaces in between, which I love. That's what really caught me is life, death, and the space in between. So I would like to hear a little bit of your story on how your journey from psychologist to medium to host of a really top 10 podcast in spirituality.
Yeah. So, this is such an interesting, it's been such an interesting journey for me. And so much of the journey truly has been kind of in the closet, frankly. So when I was 18 years old, I lost my aunt. She had juvenile onset diabetes. She was waiting for a kidney and pancreas transplant. And while she was waiting for the transplant, they realized her heart would not be strong enough to withstand the transplant. And so they needed to go in and repair her heart to make sure that it was strong enough for the transplant. And when they went in to repair her heart, she did not survive the surgery. And so I got that call that, so many people have gotten in their lives, that horrifying call of like, she didn't make it. And like I said, I was 18 at the time. It was my first, what I call out of order death, because it just didn't make sense. And there were a couple people in high school that had died tragically, and those deaths always like really shook me to my core. But this was something completely unexpected, and she was actually now the age that I am now, which brings it to a whole other meaning and
Oh,
understanding, because
yeah.
now I really can see how much more life she had to live. And so it's just when I think about it today, it's in some ways even more devastating, because conceptually I didn't really understand that then. I mean, it was horrible, but now I'm like, wow, like to be taken from this world at 48 would with not young kids, but kids, high school, college age kids, and everything that you had before you just feels horrible. And I'll just fast forward a little bit because there's a lot in between this, but I had a lot of anxiety as a result of her death that I didn't necessarily tie to her death. After college, I got a job that I was very, very unhappy with. I quit my job. I waited tables, and I decided I was going to go back to graduate school for psychology. And my second year in graduate school, I had what I thought was a dream, but what I now know was my first visit from her. And she came to me. It was before my cousin's wedding, her son, and she showed me an image of my mom standing at the kitchen sink standing at the kitchen sink in my childhood home. And she said to me, "Tell your mom not to be upset. Tell her I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at the wedding." And then I saw an image of my uncle, her brother, and he was pushing my cousin in a stroller. And he said, my uncle was outside walking, and she said, "Let him know I hear him when he talks to me. I know what he's saying and I hear him, and just let him know that." So my uncle's an orthopedic surgeon, so not exact come from a family of physicians, so not exactly the most spiritually open. They tend to be more materialist in their thinking. What you see is what you get.
You get.
And I called my mom immediately, and I shared with her the story. And my mom started crying, and she said, "I was standing at the kitchen sink last night speaking to her, and I said, I can't believe you're not going to be there. I can't believe you're not going to be at the wedding." And then it happened. Then I called my uncle and I shared with him what I had heard. And he said, that's when I speak to her. That's when I'm out talking, when I'm talking to her. And I often talk to her about my kids. And he said, and I do it when I'm out running or walking. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. I don't know what it is. I don't know what to make of it, but I knew that there was something there. And I had a professor at the time who was interested in indigenous healing practices, as well as really, really grounded in psychoanalytic psychotherapy. So I thought, okay, she could be someone that might be able to give me some answers and understanding here. So I reached out to her. I went into school that day and I shared with her what happened. And she said, I think you're opening up to something. I think you should, you know, open up more. And I'm thinking, what does that even mean? I mean, this was so not in my repertoire of anything. I had read Brian Weiss's Many Lives, Many
Like
Masters
many
and
of
was definitely intrigued. But yeah, I call it the gateway drug, because I think it really does
It's
open
definitely
people
one of
up.
them.
Yeah. It's just such like an easy way in because he's so grounded in
Mhm.
real, he's steeped in traditional
Yes.
psychiatry. So it's,
Yeah.
and he kind of stumbled into this as well. And so she said, you should really pursue this. And I thought, what am I pursuing here? I'm in the midst of grad school. I'm in my second year. I was getting ready to get married. Like there was just a lot kind of going on. And I put it to the side. And then she actually gave me the name of Medium at the time. She told me, here, read Sylvia Browne's books, because that was one of the few, I mean, this was 25 years ago. She was one
Yeah.
of the few mediums that was really out there, like her and maybe John Edwards.
Right.
And so she said, and here's the name of a medium if you ever want to work with someone. And I kind of put that away for a while and fast forward about, let's see, 5 or 6 years. And my grandfather, my papa, died. And it happened again. He came through with messages, always in that sort of in between waking up dream space, like when I'm
Mhm.
starting to wake up, but then I fall back into sleep. And then it started happening with patients' loved ones. And I started having same way always. And I thought, okay, what is going on here? I need to understand this. I need to be able to really control this and figure out how to best manage what's going on here. Because I can't have, I mean, things were going crazy in my house, lights flickering, lights going on and off. My husband who's not at all spiritually minded, was like, what is happening here? Something is happening. I don't know what it is, but something is happening. And so that's when I started to work with this medium to really hone in on, okay, what are these, how is this information coming to me? What am I supposed to do with it? How do I understand it? How can I control it? And I did that for many, many years. Also, like while I'm building my private practice on the outside, internally, kind of this is also what I'm working on for myself in terms of my own growth and spiritual development.
And I love that you bring up Dr. Weiss, because when that was, like you said, it's like a gateway drug. That was one of many for myself as well. I mean, it was also Sonia Chiquette. I love her. She's not on the clinical side, but she's definitely a good teacher on the medium and spiritual side. And so when you bring the two together, it's very interesting how that practice comes. And if you're open to it, discuss how you've been able to integrate the two in your own life and in your own practice.
Yeah, so I think that the evolution of the soul is, I mean, psychology, psych means the Greek, the Latin derivative, is it the Latin derivative of psyche is soul, Latin or
So
Greek? Greek, one of the two.
Greek. It's Greek.
Greek, it's Greek. And so I really feel like we've gotten so far away from the soul in psychology. We've become all about the mind and not about the soul. And I think that when you are integrating, we talk about mind, body, spirit, or mind, body, soul. When you are really fully integrated, then psychological health will follow, because when you're disconnected from the soul, from the psyche, you are going to struggle. And that's how I've started to see my work more and more over the years. It's like when someone comes in to me, I can see where their life is out of alignment, whether it's intuition and just like knowing, or years of doing this clinical work. I know this is where things are not in alignment for you. And sometimes I can even start to see where they fell out of alignment for them. And that's where I start to tap into
Beautiful.
the into the intuitive piece more. Like there are times where I can sit in meditation and see, oh, something happened at this age, and something shifted. Now, I won't always say that because I'm very careful to still in terms of how I practice my intuition in my clinical work. But at this point, everything feels so intertwined. It's like you almost can't separate them out, if that is clear.
That
But
makes perfect
I think
sense to
that,
me.
yeah, I think, it's hard to know too. I've been doing this for 25 years now. So much of what I do is intuitive because I've been doing it so long. So when you work with so many people over the course of 25 years, you start to get a felt sense for what's going on with someone even before they walk into your office.
Yeah.
And so I don't they're not separate per se anymore. They're very, very integrated for me. Although there are times where I can very specifically hear information that is feels like it's coming from outside of me. And like I have a client, I have her permission to talk about this, who I knew was trying to get pregnant, and she wasn't struggling to get pregnant, but she wasn't getting her period, and she wasn't nothing was showing up on a pregnancy test that she was pregnant. And I had an intuitive download that she was pregnant. And I had other clients who were also trying to get pregnant at the same time, and I did not have that same experience with them. And this came very clearly outside of myself, and it dropped in, and I just knew it. But I never said anything to her because I knew that she needed to, that part of her process was being on this journey of struggling a little bit with the anxiety around wanting to control everything and wanting to make sure that everything worked out just as she planned it. And if I would have jumped in with that information, it would have undermined that process for her. Now, I did share with her once she told me she was pregnant, that I knew she was pregnant, and and what had happened for me, because at this point, many of my patients now know that, I mean, they know I have this podcast. They know that there's a spiritual, that I am more spiritually integrated. And so they sometimes are curious, like, do I ever get information for them? When does that information come through? If I've ever had loved ones come through. So I did share that with her. And at that point, it was really reaffirming for her to hear that. And I think it did ease some of the anxiety throughout her pregnancy, that I had gotten this intuitive hit that said she was pregnant. I think that there was certainly some security there. But we also discussed that and we processed that. So it wasn't just like, oh, here's the information, you should feel great about things. It was like, here's the information. How does it feel for you to know that? What is that like for you? What is that security about for you? What if you didn't know this? So it's not just dropping in intuitive information. It's really exploring then what it might mean for someone to have that information available to them.
And that's very key. That's very important. That's very important. And I feel like at times it's my guides personally is like you weren't ready for that information.
Right.
So that
Right.
sounds a little bit of what was like if you stepped in before she told you. That's kind of the same, not the same thing, but very similar in the thought process. You're not ready for certain information. It'll come. And
Right. And it's not my job to disrupt that process for someone. And I'm always very careful and very discretionary when I do get information, if I share it and how I share it. So I have
right.
some clients who have zero interest in anything like this. They don't want to know about loved ones who are on the other side. In their mind, when you die, and that is their reality. And so, will I explore that with them? Absolutely. But will I put my views on them? Absolutely not. That is
Absolutely not.
not my place. That is not my role as a therapist. It's my role to help them in their journey. And part of that might be exploring, like, why do you think that when we die, that's it, that's the end? And I have some people who are very, very, I work with a lot of corporate executives, attorneys, doctors, you know, that whole much more material way of thinking about the world.
Yes.
And once in a while, they'll have a spiritual experience and they'll come in and they'll be like, okay, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to share it with
Share
you.
with you.
And because I know that you believe this. And I said, it's not about a belief. I mean, it is about a belief system in
Belief
some ways,
system.
but what it's really about is the reality of what you experience in your life. And once you have these experiences, you cannot deny that reality anymore. I'm not
Very
someone who
true.
lives in a place of, you know, hallucinogenic thinking or delusions. I'm very, very grounded
You're very
in this
grounded.
3D reality. And I've had these experiences that feel unexplainable to me. And so now, and that's what really sent me on this journey of how can I more deeply understand what's going on? So back to your initial question is like, that's how I sort of think of integrating these pieces, is that we are a soul. We are a soul in a human body that is here to experience this human life and grow. And that to me is what psychology is all about, is how can people grow their soul?
And that's a nice segue into the start of the podcast. What kind of led you to start this beautiful podcast?
So I had done, like all good students, because I can't do anything not, studying it for years and practicing it. I had done a medium internship. So I opened my doors. I said to friends and friends of friends, I will do readings for you for free. I just want to explore and see if I can do this. And I did it for 3 months. And then I was like, this is not the path I want to go down. And again, put it aside for a while. And then I had a friend reach out to me and she was like, let's do reading. She was like a new friend and she was getting into this and I was getting, someone knew I was into this. She said, let's do some readings together and see what happens. And we both brought people over. And one of the people that came over for me was a friend that was like more of an acquaintance. And she brought in, she sat down and her father-in-law came through, and very clearly it was, he had messages for her husband about their son and what he felt like he had been missing and how proud he was, and they were sort of generic, and I was sort of like, okay, those are some generic messages, but excuse me. But at the end of the reading, he said, he showed me this blue ring, and it was a very, very clear image of this ring. And I'm actually reversing the story. This reading came first before my medium internship. This was what spurred the internship. So I did this reading, this ring. She went home. She told her husband, yeah, she saw this ring. She gave him the other messages. He's like, seems kind of generic. And my dad never wore jewelry. He then goes home for the weekend and goes back to his home in Philadelphia, and his mom walks in the room and she says, I just found this ring of your father's and I think he'd like you to have it. And it was the exact ring, exactly as I had described it. And so that's when I was like, maybe there is more here for me to explore. And that's when I did this medium internship. And I spent 3 months doing readings. And when I finished, I was like, that didn't fill me up in the way that I really wanted it to. I love my work with people. I love going deep with people and I see clients, I do depth psychology. I see clients very long term. And I love building really deep, meaningful relationships and connections. But I felt like there was this part of me that needed to get fed. I could no longer deny this knock at my head, frankly, that was like, you cannot let this go. You can't just go back to who you were. This is who you are now. And so that was sort of the genesis of the podcast was, okay, I'm very grounded. I'm very steeped in, traditional psychotherapy. I'm in my community. I volunteer. I'm a mom. Like I'm seen as someone who's a grounded rational person. And I've had these experiences that have been so transformative that it has literally changed my life. So where can I bring those two together in a way that feels really authentic to me and that could help other people? And that was the birth of the podcast. And when I initially started it 7 years ago, I was like, okay, maybe I'll have like 5,000 people, 5,000 downloads, and maybe some people will listen, and I'll have some good guests on. And one of my first big guests was Dr. Eben Alexander, who wrote Proof of Heaven. And I went to a
Yeah.
workshop and I just walked up to him and I was like, would you maybe be on my podcast, that at that point had like 3 episodes? And this was a little bit before podcasting was like, had blown
Huge.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that really helped me, but he said, sure. And so he led to more and led to, like, it was just, and it's just flowed effortlessly ever since. And I've had some of the most amazing thinkers in this space on
Yes.
over 7 years, 450 episodes, I think. And it's just been a remarkable journey. And it's been such a great way for me to show how the psych and the psychology and the spirituality can really come together. And that's always the lens through which I am seeing all this. So it's the lens through which I talk about it on the podcast.
And the podcast is great. And you have some
Thank you.
very excellent speakers people that I also follow. I mean, I love Laura Lynn Jackson. And when I came across that episode, I was like, ooh, I was like instantly listening to it. So
Yeah, and I think what's, there are certainly the bigger guests, but there's so many amazing people who have had
yes.
really profound stories of spiritual awakenings, of openings, of transformation through a spiritually transformative experience. And it has helped them tremendously. And I want people to hear this and to start themselves to think about how they can begin to really open up to a more spiritual way of living, because I think we're not going to solve the problems we're in the way we've been trying to solve them. And
No.
we are certainly not going to solve this mental health crisis continuing down the same path we've been on. We have to open up to a more spiritual, to the part of ourselves that's always been there, is this spiritual part of ourselves. I mean, that's what Dr. Lisa Miller, who she's like my God. I love her work. If people are not familiar with it, The Awakened Brain, The Awakened Child, she's incredible. And she's the one who is saying, like, spirituality is not something you need to discover. It's not something you need to learn. It's just something you need to find your way back to. And I
Yes.
think that's what it is. We are born spiritual beings and we lose that along the way. And it's just about coming and finding your way back to that spiritual self.
And finding our way back to our spiritual self. So you had the call nobody wants at 18, and you had that beautiful visit. I love visitations. And then you fast forward many years, you have the loss of your grandfather and then visitation. And then you're like, okay, there's something to this. And you're going about and bringing it all together. How has that shaped your definition of peace? What is your personal definition of peace?
My definition of peace is that there is a genuine trust that what is put before me is there for my soul growth, even if that is exceptionally, exceptionally difficult. And even if in the moment, I don't want to believe that that's the case. And I think that that's really important. I don't I deal with people who've experienced significant trauma, loss. I'm not saying that those things are there because I mean, we could talk soul contracts, but that could be a whole other
That's a whole other
conversation
episode.
that we sort of, yeah, that we, excuse me, that we choose, that we sort of lay out these challenges throughout our lives so that we can grow our soul. And I think sometimes that can feel really punitive and really harsh, especially when people have experienced things. I always feel like the loss of a child is so traumatic, or horrific trauma and abuse, or, we're born into circumstances of war and just horrible kind of societal issues, like it's very, very hard in those situations to say, oh, well, this is what your soul chose. And you just have to accept it and grow. I think we have to look at, okay, what is the human element of this, and how do we grow from this? What is the sort of post-traumatic growth that you can experience in any situation? But I think it's really hard to think about from a soul contracts perspective that your soul would bring this on. Again, we're trying to understand the level of the soul from the experience of the human mind. And so there aren't necessarily words that kind of can correlate
Right.
specifically to that. I think I might have lost kind of track of the question here as I'm
Your
continuing
personal definition
to
of
talk.
peace.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm like, where was I going with this? And so for me, that definition of peace is really that trusting and knowing that what is unfolding for me is what I need.
And with that definition of peace, how do you find peace every day? How do you bring that peace into your life?
I do meditate almost every day, or find some kind of quiet space, whether that's taking a bath or reading a book. But I also think it's about being really purposeful about what my life looks like on a day to day. I try to have something in my schedule. Right now, I'm lucky enough that a lot of what is in my schedule are things that bring me so much joy and fill my heart. So that brings me peace. I'm clear who I surround myself with. If I there are people that do not feed my energy in a positive way, I don't surround myself with them. I make really conscious. I'm much more conscious, and I think that um, when we talk psychologically, one of the things we talk about from the lens of kind of a more analytic lens is how do you make the unconscious conscious? And Jung says, when I'm going to misquote this, so I'm not even going to say it right now. My mind's a little bit cobwebby on a Sunday morning. Um, but this notion of like, so many people are very asleep at the wheel of their life. You're going
Yeah.
through the motions. You're not even conscious of what you're doing. You're going from point A to point B to point C, just trying to get through the day. And so the choices that you're making are not from a conscious place. They're from a very unconscious place. And this is how people find themselves in jobs they hate, relationships they're unhappy with. The list goes on and
It
on. And
goes
those I
on.
think are typically the main ones, right?
Yeah.
A place they live they don't like, whatever it might be. And when you start to become more conscious of your early patterns, conscious of the choices that you're making, conscious of the things that are coming out of your mouth, conscious of the things that you're thinking, you are much more able to live from a conscious place. And when you're living from that conscious place, every choice you make is intentional and therefore has the propensity to bring peace into your life. Because if you're making a choice that isn't, you're making a choice away from peace and towards something else, towards chaos, towards toxicity. Everything is a choice. And
Yeah.
even at times where there were periods of time where I served on multiple school boards, and I'm like, I can never complain about how filled my schedule is. I don't like to say busy because busy is a creation of my own doing. So if I am making those choices, then I cannot make those choices and have
Yes.
more peace.
Yes.
Even at times when it feels like you can't, I promise you can.
Yes. I 100% agree. And it's kind of jarring at times when when you wake up that subconscious and you're like, oh, okay. And now I sometimes think it brings on a different kind of chaos because now we're aware. It's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you say it, you can't unsay it. So you're very aware. And that is a new way of like, okay, now I have to bring, not, I choose to bring peace to this situation. Or how do I bring peace to the situation? Do you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's also why might I be choosing to not bring peace to this? Or why might I be choosing more chaos or toxicity or bad relationships? That is an opportunity and an invitation to look deeper inside of yourself and to really go inward and ask what can be really difficult questions, because you have to take a look at your life and say, what am I doing here that's not working for me? And why am I doing it?
Would you consider that shadow work?
You know, I guess yes, from a traditional, like from a Jungian perspective, absolutely. I mean, that is the shadow, are the parts of ourselves that we don't want to see, that we don't want to look at. They're also the parts of ourselves that aren't necessarily conscious, right?
Right.
We have repressed them, we have suppressed them, we are denying them, all kind of the psychological defenses that are available to us. We have used those because in facing those parts of ourselves, it's painful. And it's hard. I mean, I was in therapy for 17 years. 17 years. Like, I did a lot of that work of like needing to face the ugly parts of myself. And it's not like those parts are gone. They're still very much there. But they're much more integrated and accepted as just a part of who I am. And I don't need to necessarily be ashamed of them. I don't necessarily need to like quiet them. I'm just like, oh, there's that part of myself that I don't like very much. But here I know why it's there and I know what purpose it served. And I allow myself now to be much more accepting of those different parts of myself. So I think, yes, there's a lot of ways, I'm using the parts. I'm not an IFS therapist, but I've used that language for years. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of coming out more of like the self-psychology, is this notion of like we have these fragmented pieces of ourselves, and they fragment for a reason in early childhood because they protect us. And the
Mm-hmm.
purpose of therapy is to bring those pieces, those parts together to make ourselves whole, to
Yes.
integrate the
Yeah.
entire self, the psyche, the soul.
Yes, as someone who has, as part of my therapy, I have done the parts, and it's a very, for me, I equate it to Inside Out. It's like with a different spin.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I love that movie. I recommend it all the time to people. Yeah. And I think, there are so many different, one of my teachers, my old consultant, always said, it's sort of same wine, different bottle. Like everything is just a little bit shifted.
Shifted.
They take some of what is more traditional. It's interesting too that people are talking now about like shadow work, right? And that's really traditional psychotherapy. That is depth psychotherapy through the lens of Jung. So they're talking about it as if it's like this new thing, we're doing shadow work. This is the tradition of true psychotherapy. And we moved away as a model to more evidence-based prescriptive practices like the medical model. This is like a whole other platform,
Yeah, again.
a whole other soapbox of mine. And as we moved away from that, again, we moved away from the soul. We moved
Yeah.
away from really sitting with, thinking about, reflecting, feeling things intensely and allowing those feelings to move through us, to what are your symptoms? Here's how we treat them. Good luck and be on your way.
Right. Right. And that's a soapbox for me because I don't like that approach, but that's just, it's not a good one in my
Yeah, and
opinion.
it works, and it works for symptom reduction for sure. And for some people it works longer term, but I think if you're not doing, I'm all for symptom reduction. No one likes the feelings of anxiety. No one likes the feelings of being depressed. But what is the call of your soul when you are feeling that? What is that about? Because for most people, you can look back and figure out, oh, you know what? This is where I started to fall out of alignment. This is where I
Mhm.
started not listening to my soul, not being true to what I wanted. Again, I'm not saying that's easy work. I know it's not.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
No.
Right.
It's
Right. And
not easy work.
you're going to have to make some hard choices when you look at what you want in your life. And sometimes those take really years. Like when people come into my office the first time and they're like, how long is this going to take? And I look at them and I'm like, you don't want to know my answer, but how long has it been that how long did it take you to get here?
Right.
And they kind of like bristle. And
Yeah.
I said, I promise you in 6 to 8 weeks, you will start to feel some relief. Let's start there.
There we
Um,
go.
10 to
Yeah.
15 years later, they're still with me. Not, and I always say this, not because I either say either I'm a really bad therapist or they value the work so much and they value the relationship and they value the ability to really look inward and make those choices and ask the questions of themselves and have a mirror back to them of what I'm seeing. And I'm not a yes therapist. I'm not just sitting there reflecting back. I do challenge people. I will, if someone is heading down a wrong path, I will say, not so sure. You can do what you want, but from my perspective, here's what I'm seeing. And that's because I've built really long-term relationships with people. So I can do that more now. And they know, and there's trust there, and there's a knowing that I'm in this for them, for what's best for them. But I
And
think that,
yeah,
that is the journey of the soul. Like this is what we're talking about. This is what it means to be on a soul's journey.
is. And I just want to interject, not spiritually, but I love my therapist for that reason. He will challenge me. He's not just a reflector. He is are you sure about that? Wait a second.
Mm.
What you just told me does not make sense in what you think you're going to do here. So I love those type of therapists. They're the best. Thank you for being one.
Yeah, and I get a lot of people who are like, I don't want someone to just yes me. And I always explore that with people too, because I'm like, well, let's talk about that. Like you say that, but what does that actually mean? And then when you don't just yes them and you challenge them and they push back, it's like, well, I'm curious about, you said you wanted this, but now when you're getting it, you don't want to hear what I'm
Yeah,
seeing or what you're saying, and I am reflecting it back to you, but you don't like the way it sounds when it's being reflected back to you. So there's a lot of
love that.
nuance in that, but so much of it is about the relationship.
Yes, yes. And kind of on that note, how do you help others bring peace into their lives?
Like my clients or
Just in general, just in general, how do you feel you bring peace? You could be your kids, your spouse, your clients, your colleagues. How do you feel you bring peace?
I think it's an energy. So how am I showing up energetically? How do I show up in my home? How do I show up in my practice? How do I show up on my podcast? I mean, I have a lot of energy, so I think my energy can tend to feel more boisterous. Like it's not necessarily the most calming energy, but I can move into that space when I need to. And that's how I think of, even when I show up, particularly for my patient. I use patients and clients interchangeably, but when I show up for them, I think a big part of the healing is showing up in love and really just being there, open, wholehearted, and loving all of them, even the parts of them that they don't love, and even the parts of them that sometimes I don't love. It's like finding that space to be accepting and loving of all of them. And I think through that love comes such peace.
Yeah, yeah. And my one of my favorite questions, and it's a question because I try and put it into a real world perspective. And that's a mouthful this morning. And that's what's in your toolbox. So you've disclosed you have kids, and so they're stressed out, whether it be an exam, a game, that they actually got the lead in the play, and they're like, oh, it's opening night, and they're a bundle of stress and nerves, and if you take yourself back, you're like, it's gonna be the end of the world if I don't pass, if we don't win, if I don't, if I flub my lines. So what would you do? What's in your toolbox to bring peace in those moments?
I think the main thing I do is I just listen. I'm not going to make the feeling go away. That's not actually my job. My job is to help them sit with and tolerate those feelings and validate those feelings for them. And I'll say things like, I mean, it's really, really hard to be a parent. It is
Yes.
the greatest. It is the greatest. My children are my best spiritual teachers, my best.
Yeah.
They have taught me so much. They have taught me so much about myself. They've taught me so much about when to keep my mouth shut, which is still very hard for me. But,
Guilty.
I love this. Yeah, I love the saying, like, God gave us two ears and one mouth.
Mm.
And I try as much as I can. Far from perfect at this. And my kids would tell you, my son would tell you I'm far from perfect. My daughter
So
probably
would
thinks I'm better
mine.
at it. But my son would say she can't keep her mouth shut. And I have a harder time with it because I get anxious.
Mm.
But I've learned from them that the best thing I can do sometimes is just not sometimes, probably 95% of the time, is just to listen and to for them reflect back like, yeah, this is really hard. This is really anxiety provoking. Why did you do that? Why did you make that choice? What was that about for you? Like asking them questions to be self-reflective so they can start generating this own internal process for themselves to start asking their soul these questions. And again, like always meeting whatever they do. I mean, everything I say to my kids is all of this is for your learning. So if you make a mistake, you screw something up, it doesn't work out, we'll learn from it and we'll do better the next time. And that's literally the container that I try my best to hold for them because that is what this is all about learning. And everything is an opportunity to learn. And I really try to not have judgment around the choices that they make, although I do sometimes, and I try to just keep it to myself. But also support them in the things that I know that they're going to do that are going to be stupid and not great, but that I know adolescent. I have two teenagers and a 11-year-old, so tween. I know I'm not someone who's like, you absolutely should not do this. I'm like, you are going to do these things because they're rites of passage, they're developmental things that kids do, and I know they do them. So how can we make choices safely? How can we make choices from places of consciousness? How can we, I mean, I don't use those words because they'd be like,
We
Mom,
don't
what are
use
you
those words,
doing?
but I totally, that safe space. It's like,
Yes,
okay, it's 2 in the morning. Call me. I don't care
right.
where you're at. I don't care what you're
Exactly.
doing. Call me. Please call me and not an Uber. I don't trust Uber, so no
Right.
offense, Uber. But I want to make sure that you and your friends get home safely because it's
Right.
usually more than one of you.
Right, right. And that's what I want. I want my, it was funny last night we were sitting watching the football games and one of my son's friends came in. My son never wants kids at our house. My daughter always, her friends were always here. My son is like, none of my friends can come here. And his friend walked in and he was like, I was just telling all the kids at school that everybody should come here because your parents are really chill. And like chill, I was just at my high school reunion last week. Chill is the last word that people in high school would ever use to describe me. Ever in a million years, chill would be at the bottom of their list. But that is a result of the work that I've done over the past now 30 years since I've been in high school, because it has been to get to that place of trusting, chilling, and peace.
And I love that. That is very similar. I guess I wouldn't have been described as chill either, but you've done all this work and you are on this amazing journey helping others do all this work.
Yeah,
So,
I love it. I love it.
and are there any other words of wisdom when it comes to peace or psychology and spirituality?
Just take the time to invest in yourself. I think there is no greater investment in life than the one you make in yourself. And that doesn't have to be through therapy, by the way. Like, I want to be
Yeah.
very clear. There are lots of modalities to heal, and just don't bypass your own healing through some of those modalities. I think they can
Right.
be like ways around, not through.
True. Yep.
And so make sure that whatever modality you choose, it's a modality that really brings you deeper into alignment and connection with yourself. However you get there, I'm not going to tell you it has to be this way or that way, but have fun exploring, because it's really fun. There are some really fun ways to know yourself. It can be really scary. Some of them I'm still avoiding. Like, I'm not, not necessarily willing to go down those paths just yet. And I'm sure there's a reason for that, but it's fun. It's fun to know, to get inside your own head. It's scary, but it's fun.
Yes, that is a very true statement, especially when you start doing the deeper work, the asking, why am I thinking this way? Why am I doing this? What is the pattern? And it's kind of like it's hard at first, but you learn a lot in the process.
Hmm. Hmm. And that's the gift that keeps on
That is
giving. I think when you know yourself, there's nothing more spiritual than that.
no. And I want everybody to like and subscribe and take a listen to your podcast. And we will have a link to it in the description below. And check it out, guys. It's really nice. It's a fun podcast. You learn a lot.
Yeah.
You learn a
It
lot.
is it is like a course. It is, and it has, I use the podcast as a library for some of the courses that I teach, because I feel like it really is. There's just so much there, and so many amazing teachers in their spaces.
Yes. And speaking of courses, you could always visit Dr. Amy's website, dramyrobbins.com, for courses, the full catalog of the um, podcast, and learn more about who Dr. Amy is and the wonderful work that she does. And thank you. I'm going to put Dr. Amy in the green room. We'll be right back. So I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. I want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week. And have a peaceful day.